Hello, and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christine Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christine. How are you today?
I am good. It's been an interesting couple of weeks.
It has been. And we're going to be talking about a topic that I have been talking about for the past 2 weeks with clients and doing presentations at trade shows, webinars, podcasts. So I'm super excited. It's been on my top of my mind and on my vocabulary for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how often this kind of challenge or topic shows up in several different areas of business. And just even yesterday on a webinar that I was doing, some of these things came into play. And we were talking about the balance sheet, and it even showed up there on that webinar of, like, what are we looking at when we're doing pricing?
Yeah.
What matters, things like that. So it's interesting where it pops up and how important it is.
Yeah. And so today we're going to be talking about pricing, right? How to price, what matters when you're doing your pricing. And we're not going to give you an exact formula. We're going to be talking about some of the concepts, some of the things to look out for. And you had your balance sheet webinar yesterday, and the balance sheet's a super important thing to learn and know about. It wasn't until I was probably about 20 years into my business before I understood what the balance sheet was and how to use it as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And once I understood the balance sheet and how to use it as a tool, it changed how I looked at my business, and it changed how I spent money in my business and how I invested in my business and how I understood my business. And then, even now when I open up QuickBooks, the first thing I go to is my balance sheet. When I go to visit other businesses, the first thing I look at when I visit their business is their balance sheet. And when people say, "Hey, can you look at my business?" I say, "Send me your balance sheet." So to me, the balance sheet is like literally like your heart health report, right? Because that's going to tell me a lot of things, not your P&L, not how shiny your dump truck is or what color your mower is. Your balance sheet is going to tell me the story first. You can't hide too many things on a balance sheet. So that's what I always like to look at. But today we're talking about pricing. And this has been a hot topic because a lot of people have to get their estimates out. They are starting to bid projects. They're getting all their lawn maintenance contracts out. A lot of, if they're doing lawn applications, they've already got a lot of those out. But they're going to be redoing that, and they're going to start doing their hardscape estimating, landscape estimating. And pricing is a big deal. And boy, is there a lot of like confusion or misinformation around that. So we're going to go over it again today. I know we've gone over this again, but it's so important to have the proper pricing that I think we should be talking about it on a consistent basis in this industry and all business to make sure that it's always being done right, because there's going to be more money made keeping our pricing correct and then estimating correctly based on the proper pricing than anything else we do in our business, right? We can buy whether it's a Z spray or a steel green or a perma green or whatever you're using, or whatever mower you're using, whatever dump truck you have is irrelevant if your pricing is not correct, and then your estimating is not correct because your pricing is not correct.
Yeah. And you would be surprised, like just because someone knows numbers, or let's say they're a CPA or an accountant, that doesn't mean they know the pricing strategy of a company, right? Like, how should you price? So it's a different animal. It's, you could have somebody who understands numbers, who can read through a balance sheet, in a profit and loss statement, or can reconcile your accounts or close your, financials for that period. But that doesn't mean that they understand all the concepts of pricing strategy. And I've even worked with other accountants to help them understand better their pricing strategy, look at all the moving pieces. And as well, I've worked with lawn and landscape companies too, to kind of like pull all the pieces in. And even some of those people that really have their profit margin dialed in, and they're making a good gross profit and net profit in their business, there's still pieces of the pricing strategy and what contributes to that they don't have dialed in. So it's really important to understand, just because you know your numbers, or your way around your financials, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to successfully really dial in all those pieces of a pricing strategy and how to get there.
Yeah, and I think, I talk about it all the time. I'm always looking at my pricing, but I'm always learning, right? I learn a lot from you. I learn about from other business owners. So, just because I know what I know doesn't mean I can't learn more, right? So always talking about it and learning and looking at it from different perspectives helps to kind of keep us up to date. So we want to talk about pricing, and some of the things that we need to understand is like there's more than just the numbers, right? So we have to look at like our local market conditions. We want to understand where we at, how competitive is the market that we're in, what's going on. Last year was an interesting year all across the country. We had an election year, and we also they popped interest rates up, and so it was a little tough last year. So people dropped prices all across this country. Some of our clients were letting me know that they were getting undercut by 50%, but they knew what their margins had to be, so they were not lowering their prices. But people just inadvertently dropped their prices, and then they were broke because they were giving work away. So we don't want to do that, but we want to be aware of what is going on. And we want to know where we are in the country. We want to know what's going on in the country. We want to know if it's an election year, if interest rates are going up and down. We don't want to whine about it, but we want to be aware of it, right? And we
Mhm.
also want to know what region of the country we're in. So, like we had all those horrible hurricanes last year. And there was a lot of
Yeah.
work in Florida last year because of the hurricanes. So we don't want to gouge customers, but we also want to make sure that, if there's a high demand for work, we don't want to be the cheapest guy in town. So we want to make sure that we're getting paid for the extra stress and extra hours and overtime pay when those situations come into play.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really good point, is we need to understand in your pricing strategy, where could you drop your low points to? Like if you're doing a discount, how much do you need to discount? And we have this really great little tool in our Green Profit Academy toolbox, our Green Profit toolbox. And it will actually tell you, and I love this, it tells you, if I discount my price by this much, this is how much more work I am going to have to produce to hit that level of revenue or profitability. So when it comes to discounting, it's one of those things to where if you are going to discount, you need to know what's the cost of you discounting this, and don't just discount to discount. Know like what is the strategy behind that.
Yeah, just don't drop your numbers to get work because you have to sell or do twice as much work to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's never a good deal. Also knowing cost structures, right? So this is the biggest thing I've been talking about for the past 2 weeks, right? Is there's labor, material, then also equipment, and which is different than your truck. So because you can have one truck, but you can have 3 different pieces of equipment on that trailer or with that truck, and depending on what type of work that you're doing, right? And I have seen some really awesome crews. I love watching shop tours on YouTube, right? And these guys show all their great equipment. So you can have a skid steer and a mini X and a little mini skid steer on one crew. I mean, you could have $250,000 on one crew. So, or you could have a mowing crew and they have a couple different pieces of equipment. So you have your trucks and your equipment. You have to know how to charge for that. Also, you have your subcontractors, and that can be an interesting how people marking up for that. I've seen as low as 6%, and I've people are all over the place with that. But seldom am I hearing a 50% margin markup on, a margin on subs. So, I like to hear 50 to 55% as a minimum gross profit margin, and even a 65% gross profit margin is the sweet spot. I never hear anybody talk about that with subs. And then, so you've got your labor, materials, equipment, trucks, subs, and overhead. So, that's the office, that's the owner, especially if the owner's not working in the field. That is your salespeople, that's your shop, lights, marketing and advertising, right? How do we pay for that? I almost never hear any talk about the overhead. But we want to definitely address the labor, materials, equipment, trucks, and subs. And how do you calculate how you're going to pay for that?
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the things when we start looking at the numbers. And I've said this several times where I'll look at someone's numbers and their percentages. And I've looked at so many different profit and loss statements and balance sheets, companies' financials, or even when someone fills out a profit assessment and a profit first assessment. And my eyes go right to the problem areas where I'm like, oh, that's an interesting percentage, or that's an interesting percentage. And I know that something is contributing to that. So, what I'm looking at with the numbers, it's a symptom of what's actually happening in the company. And there's things, and I think this would be really good to unpack here, Steve, is because this is an area where you've been talking to several business owners over the past several, weeks, and it's come up time and time again in our coaching and even our triage program, which is just amazing to right the ship faster, right? Is what are the areas, the typical areas where people are struggling with their pricing strategy and pricing model? And we've seen things where they just forget. They're like, oh, I didn't even think about bringing that in here, or calculating that into a pricing structure and knowing my cost, all the way to where they'll bring other things that don't even belong, in the pricing strategy at that point.
Right.
And they just get lost.
Right. So here's the thing that I run into, and I was there too, right? If you read Profit First for Lawn Care and Landscape Businesses, I was there too. I got myself in trouble because I wasn't charged for my trucks or my equipment. So I would be, 50 grand short every year because I wasn't charging enough, and I would borrow the money. And I did this for 5 or 6 years in a row. And that's how I ended up $250,000 in debt, and ready to hide out in Alaska because I had too much month at the end of the money, and I had to figure out how to not do that. And this is kind of how I figured it out. So the thing is, if we need a 55% gross profit margin as a minimum, really, because 55% gross profit margin, and we need a net income, right? And then we have to pay taxes, and we have to pay our overhead, and we have to pay marketing, and we have to pay insurance, and we have to pay rent, and there's all these costs, and you take all that out. So if you take 15% for profit, and you're at 55, now we're down to 40, right? Now we have marketing, right? Now we're down at that 5%. Now we're down to 35. We have taxes. You have state, like you have to pay taxes on your truck, and you have to pay property taxes. And now you're down to, right, 33 or 32. And you have to pay, your staff that works in the office, or you have to pay rent, and it keeps going lower and lower. That's why 55 is kind of the goal. So if we don't mark up labor 55, then where's the 55 come from? if we don't mark up our materials 55%, then we have to mark up something else 55. We have to mark up something even higher than 55. If we don't mark up the equipment to 55% gross profit margin, then that has to come from somewhere else that has to be even higher. So you're getting the theme here, right? So we don't mark up labor, materials, equipment, trucks, subs, and to get that 55% gross profit margin, if we don't mark up each one of those, that has to come from somewhere else at an even higher margin. And that's why if you don't do that, you end up with a 40% gross profit margin, which is the smoke alarm. I call it the smoke alarm because there's no money left. You're just working for break even. And then you can only do that for so long where it's just not worth it to be in business. So you really want to make sure that you're marking up your labor, materials, equipment, your truck. So let's say if your truck is costing you $10 an hour, you're billing it at $10 an hour. To get to 55% gross profit margin, you need to mark it up to 2.2, right? So $10 an hour times 2.2. If you're driving, don't do the math. It's $22 an hour. You have to charge for that truck to get to that 55%. And why do you do that? Because if you don't market the truck up, it's costing you 10. If you don't charge for at least 10, then you're paying out of your pocket. And that truck really needs to be a profit center to cover the cost. So these are the things that I'm finding people are not doing, and they're not thriving, and they're struggling year after year. And it's like, so you get to the end of the year and you have a net income, but that net income on your P&L has to go to work. It goes over to the balance sheet, and it has to make the payment on the equipment. And because you didn't mark up the equipment, all of your net income pays for the equipment. And that was your money that you paid for the equipment because you didn't charge the customers for the equipment. So that's where all your money went. You paid for it, not the customer.
Yeah, and that's
I did
a
it.
common one.
That's a
Is
very
they
common one.
forget
Yep.
the equipment, they forget to charge for the equipment, they forget to even mark up the equipment. Like there's just, and suddenly, all the money goes through the wash of the business.
Yes.
And then they're like, what? Why do I not have any money? Like, where did it all go? Or why did I have to pull money out of the line of credit? And that profit margin, that net profit margin, so low, there wasn't even enough to go over to the balance sheet and pay the loan payment for that equipment or for that truck or whatever else.
Yeah. And the other thing I run into is, so what a lot of people start doing, they start buying equipment at the end of the year to try to get out of paying taxes. So then they 179 accelerate depreciation to get out of paying taxes. And they get into a deeper debt because now they have a loan payment they really can't afford, because you're paying taxes on those payments. You might not pay tax this year, but every payment in the future year you're paying taxes on, because you're paying it with your net income that comes off your P&L that goes to your balance sheet. Sounds all confusing. It just, the bottom line is where people miss, they're not marking up on their equipment. So you have to mark up your labor, your material, your equipment, your trucks, your subs, and to cover all the overhead and to cover all these expenses. Sounds complicated. You can work through it. This is what I do in the triage. We figure out what the costs really are and how to mark it up. So when you are out bidding, so it really comes down to fear is why people don't do it. They're thinking, I will never be able to sell another job if I charge what I really should be charging.
Yeah.
But they do sell it. I talked to a guy yesterday. He's in Rochester, New York. He got all his numbers right. He's charging what he should charge. He had the best year he ever had in his life last year. So, and, it's just, my company, when I've got my numbers right, I've had them right for years. We grow every year, year after year after year. And last year, we grew the largest dollar-wise we ever grew in a election year with high interest rates. So it's not real. It's a matter of knowing your numbers and having the confidence to charge them, and then understanding who your clients are. So, but that's where we missed. I'm finding out where we missed the numbers in the landscape and lawn care industry.
Yeah, and the other piece of this, which is something that if you were on the balance sheet webinar from yesterday, uh, it one of the things that I went over was that liability piece on the balance sheet, right? So those liabilities, they're equipment loans, they're truck loans. So it's money that we're obligated to pay as the business. So if we're not looking at the commitment that we're making to the liability and then looking at the flip side of the coin to where we say, okay, how does this liability then serve the company? And how are we going to make money with this liability? There can be a negative net on that to where you're not only paying for that liability, but that liability isn't paying for itself either. So all the other pieces of the company have to pay for that liability. And this is another reason why in this industry, though it's so much fun to have equipment, right? We want to be intentional about the equipment that we commit to and make sure that one, that equipment is included in our pricing strategy with the markups and producing the margins that we need to pay for the equipment. And that equipment is being used to its fullest, or at least closest to its fullest in the company to generate the revenue that it needs to pay for itself.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. Yep. And you'll see there's a lot of like one man mowing crews. You'll see them with these beautiful F-350 trucks or similar, right? And they're gorgeous. And there's no name on the side of the truck. And you might see them for 1 or 2 years, or they have a full-time job, or, sometimes you'll talk to them, and not all of them, but their wife might have a really great job, like the principal of a school, or the wife is a nurse or something like that. And they're way undercutting the price of the lawn. You just have to let that guy do that. You cannot lower your price to meet him and beat him. You'll never do it. You have to find other customers that will pay the price that you need to get, right? And same thing with landscaping. We have to get the prices. So it's just kind of like you'll never win. The race to the bottom is ugly, and you will go broke trying to beat them. So it's just what that is. It's just what that is. So I'm just going to do a quick. Let me add that 50.
Yeah. So one of the things that it can be challenging as well, which is in this industry, when we're looking at labor and we're looking at equipment costs, right? This industry can be very seasonal. So we could have 8 or 9 months out of the year that need to pay for 12 months, or we can have, the service shift business model in play where you move from, let's say, lawn application to, cleanup all year round. You're doing, some sort of like landscape or maintenance of some sort, and then maybe snow might come into play. So there's services that can shift, which means that the equipment that you have in your business is being utilized for a certain period of time. And we have to look at what we call it as a utilization rate, right? And all that fanciness is that sounding, of a utilization rate is how much are we utilizing this piece of equipment in 12 months? And are we making sure that that markup and margin that we have on this equipment for the time that we're using it is covering it for the full 12 months? This can also apply to your employees and other costs in the business. So you want to make sure that you're including in that pricing strategy that the equipment is, paying for itself all year around for the time that you're going to be using it.
Yes. So like the example yesterday I was on a coaching call. Let's say if the truck costs $1,200 a month, but you're only using it for 8 months out of the year, right? So it's $1,200 a month. And don't worry about the math. I'm just going to run through it. So 12 times 12, that's $14,400. That's just for the payment, but you're only using it for 8 months. So divided by 8. So it's really, you have to recover 1,800. That's 1,800 a month, really, in 8 months, right? So really, that's going to be $450 a month. You have to, $450 a week. You're going to have to charge in the green season. That's just for the payment. That doesn't include the insurance. That doesn't include any kind of repairs. So basically, with the insurance and repairs and everything, about $600 a week is going to be your break-even charge. So $600 a week, divided by 5 days, it's $120 a day is your break-even charge. So if you
Just
want a
on the
55,
truck.
I'm just on the truck.
Yeah.
So if you want to, 120, and you want that 55% margin, 2 times 2.22, 120. And I'm just doing this to give everyone who's listening a idea of the math what it needs to look like. So it's 266 a day to get you the to get your 55% margin. Now you're only using that truck for maybe 7.5 hours in a 10-hour day, right? Because there's utilization loss no matter how efficient you try to be. So 266 for the day divided by that 7.5 hours, 10-hour days. So $35 an hour, $36 an hour. You got to figure for that truck. That's the charge. That's the curb rate charge. So
For the truck.
for
We're not
just for the
talking about
truck.
material, equipment that's going to come off the truck that you're going to
Yep. Not
use,
your
labor.
team. Yep.
Yeah.
So, yep. Divided by 60. So it's 60 cents a minute, which
So
is easy enough to figure. Yep.
one of the strategies is you can figure out each piece at a
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yep.
right? And that will really help you walk through the process of, well, how much does each piece cost me in a year? What do I have to cover for it? And then add it up, just kind of like what we walked through. Or you can list out all the pieces and then figure out how to divide it up, which would be, I think, a little bit more complicated. But we do in chapter 8 of the book walk through the this concept of how to break this out and what are some of the things that you're looking for. um, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's like anybody who reads the book and they get through chapter 8, I actually congratulate them, and
Yes,
I'm
you
that's
are awesome.
amazing. So it's very valuable, but it's not for everyone.
No.
And the strategies that are unpacked in the book and some of the tools that I share, they're not something that you go at alone by any means. It's like we have had people that go, at them alone. Some of them have the ability, to do it, like to walk through because they've been in business so many years. I know, Steve, like I had you walk through every single tool and, kind of test it. We had
Backwards
other
and
companies
forwards
do it
3
as
times.
well.
Yes,
Yeah. And even in some of those areas, like it was challenging, for Steve to walk through those. So then
it
we had to
was.
make some tweaks and stuff. So this is where in a pricing model, and even when I look at pricing in my business, it's something to where I'm looking at it and I'm looking at it with someone else. One, because I love to collaborate. And two, as knowledgeable and experienced as I am, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So it's always good to have, someone else on your team to help walk through these pieces and make sure you've got your pricing strategy dialed in and you're considering for all the things that are happening in your business, whether it's seasonal. How much are you utilizing this piece of equipment? What about your labor? Is the markup proper? And what else, right? So, fuel, maintenance, insurance, like all those little different things that come into play that need to be considered.
There's a lot of cost, and I will share with you that a lot of the people that are struggling in any businesses, it's usually a multitude of things. It's not one simple thing. It's underutilization of equipment, or they are not charging for one of the things that I talked about. They're not charging enough for labor. They're not charging at all for equipment. But maybe they're not charging enough for their markup on materials, not enough, or they're not marking their subs up enough. Subs should be a profit center, actually. And so lining up that, so it's not a thing. It can be a series of stuff, right? And
Mhm.
how many hours a day, if they work 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, what is the percentage that you're actually billing? And look at that and figuring that out. Or how many hours are you paying your team, and how many hours are you getting paid for?
Yeah.
That is a huge leak. Some
Yes.
people think that they're like, at the end of the year, they're like, oh, I billed out, I paid 12,000 hours, but I only billed 8,000 hours. And they don't realize that. That's one of the first exercises I work with people, to see how many hours that they actually paid their team and how many
Mhm.
hours they like billed for. And that's not as complicated as it sounds to figure out, but that's usually a shocker.
Yeah, that's one thing when we sit down with a client and we do a labor burden, and we, build out their labor burden, which is this really nice calculator that we use. But one of the things that it accounts for is it accounts for the production time of that employee that pays for all of the non-production time.
Right.
So it's writing the amount of the labor burden to say, okay, well, your labor burden is $20 for this guy, right? But then we got to consider that they, take off so much time, and they're not producing this amount of time, and this is their vacation time and their sick time or whatever it is. So then it shifts that labor burden by adding those things from just a straight $20 an hour to like 26 or $27 an hour.
Yeah.
So imagine leaving, $27 or $7 on the table for every $20 that you spend. I
Yeah.
mean, that you're cutting yourself short. So it's like that's almost a third of the cost. So at
Yes.
the end of the day of doing business, or the end of the month, or the year, there's this continuous, leak, right? And even if it's just a couple cents to, we're talking about almost a third of the cost. That's a huge bleed that's happening in the business.
It is. There's a huge bleed. Yes. And some of the older ways of pricing were, oh, you just double the material. The
Mm.
challenge with that is there's no labor conception and there's no material involved in it, right? So that's why, really the modern way of doing it is material, labor, equipment, trucks, and
Yeah.
everything's so much more expensive than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And then there's also a factor that I am keenly aware of, because I'm working with people now who are in Texas, who are in other parts of the country that have traffic, right?
Mm.
So when they're estimating, they have to take into consideration travel time because of traffic. So they have to actually estimate that in. So being aware of like not only production time, but also traffic, right? So what they're doing and that, and then having all this specialty equipment, these excavators that have these steel wrists that can turn, but that attachment is 20 to 30 grand. So how are we going to recover that? So here's another thing with the equipment charging is, yes, we can all figure out how much we need to charge for that piece of equipment. And this is why the balance sheet, I brought this up earlier, but we need to know how much month you have at the end of the money, because we have to make the payments. So we need to know where we are with the balance sheet and the monthly payments, because we have to make sure that we're recovering all that money.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
So some people will just charge for their equipment, they'll line item it. But other times we have too much month-end money, so we have to recover all of the equipment payments in the labor hours, because we know we're going to sell 12 or 20,000 hours. So we have to spread all of the equipment payments out over the labor hours and help recover the equipment over the labor hours too, because we can't sell enough equipment hours. So that's called upside down. But if we don't do that, there's not enough money. So we have to be able to make sure that we're guaranteeing to make all those equipment payments. So we have to make sure that we're covering all that. So it can get a little complicated if we're just looking at it and we're just tossing like one ring in the hat. In other words, we have to make sure we can cover all this. So that's why 90% of businesses don't make it to 10 years.
Right.
Because of this. Like, they're trying to do it on their own. And I did it. I thought if I just worked hard, I had the right dump truck, the right mower, the right fertilizer, the right soil, everything would work out. And it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out much easier, and it was a much more pleasant experience once I understood my pricing.
Yeah. And I remember when we were working through the tools in chapter 8, and one of the things that you brought to the table was this old school way of pricing and multiplying things with multipliers.
Yeah.
And as soon as that hit, my desk, I was like, well, hold on, hold the phone, Steve. I'm like, what is this? And I looked at, my accounting and strategic brain kicked in, and I started looking at, well, what are the individual costs? So I took this old school pricing strategy that you had brought from one of the groups that you were in. And then I ran the same situation with me breaking it out per the markup and margin concept and building in the profit. And from that old pricing strategy, there was money being left on the table. And I was like, look at this. I'm like, I worked through it. I'm like, look, we have, situation A, right? Example A with the old pricing strategy. Now let's bring in the real costs, right? Labor burden, overtime, production time, the full day, the equipment, all these different pieces. And I broke it out like as in chapter 8. And what we found was that there was more money to be made by breaking it out in detail than just using kind of an old, multiplier pricing strategy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We I think it was about $7 an hour we were off in multiple areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't but what it did was it clarified where the true costs were, and we could see it. It just lined it up, really. It identified it. So when we had increases in cost, like when COVID showed up,
Mm-hmm.
so when we had increases in cost, we could identify it and then make those adjustments specifically to those costs instead of brush stroking it, right? So
Right.
instead of going, so if let's say an application was $110, going, we have to increase it by 20%, right? Just because prices went up 20%. So we have to increase it 20%. Well, we know that the material went up 20%, but the material is only 20% of the job. So if we increase the material by 20% and the job was only, so let's say the app was $100 and the material is 20%, so it was $20, but everything else stayed constant. We only have to increase the $20 of the material 20%,
Right.
not the whole thing. So now it's 20, so $20 for the material, 20%. Now it's $24. So instead of it, now it's $4 increased to 104 instead of, now we're still competitive, but we increased our markup as opposed to going up to $120.
Yeah.
But it would be 104. It would be more than 104. But a little more than 104, but we're still competitive instead of just going 120.
Yeah.
In other words, we increased it exactly what it should have been to the exact dollar instead of brush stroking it and putting us out of a competitive advantage by winging it.
Right. Yeah. So it's allowing you to adjust one lever at a time for every piece of the pricing strategy that changes.
Right.
So I think it looking at it from that perspective eliminates the fear because you're becoming aware of what you're charging for per piece of what you're providing, and knowing that realistically there's no other way, and you're getting, and you're being fair, you're being
Exactly.
profitable, you're, being intentional, and you're making a choice. So that way, at the end of the day, like, you're certain on the facts with the pieces that are in play, and knowing what your pricing strategy is and charging what you should charge with the profitability built into it, with the overhead built into it, and knowing, okay, if I charge this, we're good, right? Now, there's the other side of once you charge it, and where are you not good anymore, right? And this goes into the other side of the business and operations, where we want to make sure that we are charging what we should charge, but also our team is being efficient in the work and the services that we're providing, which is our job as the business owner or the manager to make sure that they're aware of what success looks like and what the goal is that they're supposed to hit.
Yeah, that's crucially important. Right. How much are they supposed to complete a day and why they need to complete it?
Right. And we want to consider that in our pricing strategy. I know before the call, we were talking about some other stuff. Because if you've ever been around Steve and I, we start talking about business and, sit down because we're going to be here for a little while. So we are talking about in a business, how a process or the awareness of hours is very important. And he shared a story. I think it'd be a good story for you to reshare with our listeners, because it was just so insightful about the pavers.
Right. So, when we had a very particular process about, installing pavers, and then we had one of our foremen who went to a hardscape show and another hardscape show, and they talked about installing the pavers a different way. So he started trying the pavers, installing a different way. And, but he didn't share that with the estimator and the designer. So we had 3 jobs come in over budget on material and over budget on time. And so when we had our meeting, we're like, hey, what's going on? We're over material, which is easy to estimate for us, and over time. He's like, oh yeah, well, I widened the base up because it's just easier to do it that way. And we changed the material and we used this edge strain and we want da 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 da. And we're like, well, you have to tell us if you're going to do that. We can sell it like that. And he said, well, it's a higher quality product and it's going to last longer. And, it's customers, enjoy it. And all this, basically it was like making the bases wider and using that poly edging. Right. So, which we were fine with, but we needed to know that because it took more time. because you had to excavate out wider. You had to use more base because of material, because the base was wider. And the poly edging, it takes more time than the spiked edging. And yes, it is a higher quality product, but he did not tell us that he was doing that. And we can sell it for more dollars. But so you had to have that communication with your foreman to let you know that. So, I don't know how long he was planning on doing that before they were going to let us know that, right? But it was an interesting concept. It could have went a whole year.
Right.
So, and also doing these like corner cuts because it looked cool. But so you have to be careful when they go to these seminars that what they bring back and what they want to share with you. We just have to know that they have and he knew how many man hours, but I guess they get bored and they want to try different things, but they need to let the estimators know because they're trying to hit these man hours. So sharing with your team how many man hours and how many what the dollars mean. Our lawn techs every single day, they know how many man hours they have and how many square feet and the dollars. So we're tracking that. So you should be tracking your crews every single day, how many man hours they work, how much dollar per man hour they produce. So you take the total dollars, subtract any materials, divide it by the man hour. So if you have big jobs, landscape jobs, you should be tracking that, by the job.
Mm-hmm.
And you should not let that go too far. If you track it by the job and then you want to track it by the month and by the quarter, and you're looking for trends really. And it's not that you're rushing your guys. We weren't trying to rush that foreman. We're just like, hey, if you're going to do that process, we can sell that. We just need to know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. So that could be a situation where, right, your part of your pricing strategy is know what you're pricing, right? So how many man hours is it, right? Are you getting the right amount of hours included? If you know that you are, and this comes up very common, like with maintenance, why are you over, right? What's happening on why you're over? Do you have somebody who's changed the process? Do you have somebody who's kind of lollygagging around? Right? Do you have too many people on the crew? There's
Too
all
many
these
people on the
things.
crew. It's a
Yeah.
killer. It will kill your. Stop that if you're doing it. 3 guys on a residential mowing crew is killing your profits if you're doing it. Yep. And I know that it's hard work, but they're working anyways. Yes. Yep. Too many guys on a residential mowing crew is killing. 3 guys is just killing you. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So even if you've calculated it out with estimated hours, your hours could be wrong, right? So you need to go back and really get that dialed in, or it's not being produced in the same way, which is very common when you start scaling at your business. And let's say you used to go do the mowing, right? Now you have somebody else doing the mowing. Is that person aware of how long it should take to do each property or how much? Where do they need to be by, and this is something that Steve has shared several times. Where do they need to be by, 9 a.m.? Where do they need to be by, before lunch break? Where do they need to be by 1 o'clock? So letting them know how much of the jobs they need to get done by X amount of time, and also what quality looks like. What do you expect of them? So you don't lose that value that you're trying to, and level of service you're trying to, continue to provide.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. So, I mean, a one-man crew for mowing and lawn applications is by far the most efficient and profitable crew you can have. And you can have bigger crews, I guess, for commercial. But really, the smaller the crew, the more profitable. And I know people don't like to work on small crews because it's more work, but really they're working all day anyways. So they can only work an 8 or 10-hour day, whether they're working on a one-man crew or a 3,000 person crew. They're doing the same amount of work. They can only ride one mower, whether it's one person or 3,000 people. They can only run one string trimmer, whether it's 1 or 10 people. They can only run one backpack blower, whether it's 1 or 10 people. So this whole thing, I have to do all the work if they're working alone. No, it literally, we have time tracking. I have videos I've never caught anyone running a lawnmower and a weed whacker and a backpack blower. Really? Well, you can put a blower on a mower and ride around. Yes, you can do that. Yes, you can. I've done it. We've all done that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, they're not working any harder if they're on that crew. And you can pay them more. Usually they like that. The other thing I found is that you can pay them more. They don't have to be responsible for managing other people, and they can be really proud of the work and quality they do. They get to know the customers, have way higher retention. I had found it to be the opposite. So, but you have to start with that. It's hard to go back from that. So, when people say, how do you do that? You can hire a person just to work alone, and then hire another person just to work alone, and then go from there. But there's definite profitability. So next we want to talk about tiered services. So that basic, mid-level, so good, better, best type of ideas. And I was coaching someone around this earlier in the week, and I thought about it, and we were trying to come up with structures. And what were you kind of started the conversation today? It wasn't perspective. What was it?
Oh, on what was it? Structures.
Frame of
Oh,
reference, or
yeah, we were talking about frame of reference. Yeah.
so one of the things, so good, better, best. And so someone was sharing, we just give them ballpark. And I was like, okay, how's that work? They're like, well, it doesn't really work. It helps them, but it doesn't really work. And I was like, well, good, better, best. You're like, okay, it's like, it's good. It has like, it's okay. It's going to get you where you need to go, but it's not really great. And better is like, oh, it's totally going to get you where you're going to go, and you're going to be happy about it, and you're going to be comfortable. But better is like, it's going to get you where you want to go. You'll be comfortable and happy about it, and you're just not going to be bragging about how awesome it was, right?
That's the best.
And that's the best,
Yeah.
right? So the reason the good, better, best works, and I was thinking about this, it gives us a frame of reference. And so we have up, down, left, and right. So when you close your eyes and you open it up, that gives you a frame of reference, right? You have north, south, east, and west. It gives us a frame of reference. So good, better, and best, it gives us a frame of reference. It lets our brain figure out what is it,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows us to choose. When we just give someone a price, it's either yes or no.
Yeah.
And we don't even know is that good or bad. Like, there's no reference to it.
Right. Yeah. And then it allows the conversation to know, to be had to where, what are expectations? And this has happened. One of the things that we did with our accounting packages, right? Because it's like, how many people speak accountant? What does it mean when we say we're going to do X, Y, and Z? So we created descriptions for each of those services. So that way we knew what we understood the service to be, or that line item, our client in turn would understand as well. So it's just very basic. We took out the technical language, right? Because they don't speak lawn care, or they don't speak accountant, or whatever specialty, language that you have in your industry. And it allows that concept to be shared, to where it's like we're on the same page. We make it really simple and easy. And then we have that same experience, that same expectation, and what the outcome's going to be, and who's going to do it. So
Yeah. And so for our lawn care, we offer, basic, premium, and our all-American.
mhm.
And for landscaping, we offer a good, better, best. Usually it could be with the size of the beds. It could be with the size of the plants. Maybe we'll add in a seat wall or boulders, or add in outdoor lighting, something to give them an option. Maybe the patio will be bigger. Maybe we'll add in a little bump out for the grill area, so people don't have to have the grill on the patio. But and it's pretty much the same thing all the time. Like, we're offer a sidewalk size. One, it's going to be 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet. Patio is going to be, 300, 500, 800, and something in between that. But offering that good, better, best, and you don't know the people. A lot of times, if it's their first or second time buying, they don't really know what the size of the patio is. And then when you show them, they get more excited because it's bigger. So offering that good, better, best is really a great way to start the conversation. And same thing kind of in the sales. We've really gone to, at this point in the conversation, people have these 3 questions and giving them, because they don't even know what to ask. We've all done it. We've done it in our webinar. Any questions?
Mhm.
It's crickets. So you're like, at this point of the conversation, people ask, when is the next opportunity to get in your schedule? What is the payment schedule? What are my options?
Yeah. Yeah, so we went over a lot today. I think very valuable things. Really wanted to focus on what are the things that we need to consider, right? And bring that into the pricing strategy. So if you're out there and you're thinking about your pricing strategy and what are you missing, definitely, re-listen to this episode, because if you're out driving around, bring it back to the office and take some notes. So, and ask yourself, am I doing these things? Am I considering my labor, my total labor cost? Am I considering my equipment cost and the utilization of that equipment? Am I considering, the materials? Do I have the right markup and, to produce the right margin on, these factors? So it's one of those things in the business to where once you build out this system, you will always have it. So it's definitely turns into an asset and a great tool. If you need support with it, well, you know how to reach us. So we have clients that Steve has worked through the triage program with, which really focuses on the pricing strategy and the profitability of the business. So, I mean, it pays for itself. Gosh, I mean, just like 100 times over, you
It
know.
does. That's my favorite thing about the triage. It doesn't ever cost anybody. I know they have to pay for it, but they make so much money off of it. And it's not just this year, it's forever, as long as they're in business. So it's one of those like annuities that just keeps paying them year after year after year. Because once you get your pricing dialed in and you figure it out once, and
Mhm.
then your eyes are open and you realize what the numbers need to be, it's forever. I mean, it could be $500,000. It could be 5 million. It's probably, since I figured it out, it's over 10 million.
Yeah, easy.
So yeah, it's funded my kids' college, paid for my house, my retirement, my shop, so it's one of those things that it's, once you know it, you can't unknow it.
Mhm.
And so it's been totally worth the investment.
Yeah, and some of those things like you don't want, right, is you don't want to underbid everybody. You want to make sure what do we have to charge, right? And charge that. You also don't want to give too many discounts, because just remember, if you're discounting, you're going to have to produce X amount more work to get the revenue and the profit that you want. And it's just one of those things that like it just keeps on giving, right? It keeps on giving your profit away. So we don't want to discount. So be aware of what your bottom line is and what you need to charge for that profit in the
Yeah, don't
company.
discount. Don't Discounting is a painful way to because once you discount once to a customer, they forever want it. They
Mhm.
forever want it again. Yeah, it's you know, and I won't say we don't ever discount things. We have an early season discount, right? If you prepay the whole year, we offer a little discount. But there's a reason we do that, and we have it built into a cost, and we don't have to bill them the rest of the year. And
Mhm.
there's a very specific strategic reason for it. But if
Yes.
you're discounting, it's a very small discount. So you know That's strategic, but don't discount to get work.
Right.
It's a huge administrative cost for us for that. And it's also a scheduling. We can start our season really off with a bang, and our schedule then for the whole year for thousands of customers is on schedule. And that is like, we can sleep at night, and really it starts us off in an awesome way. So that is a huge advantage, but just discounting to get work, you have to ask yourself, like, is my sales process dialed in? How's my marketing? There's a whole bunch of other things that you should be doing if you have to discount to get to sell that job. Yes.
Another thing you don't want to do is you do not want to ignore those profit margins. So if you're seeing right now in your business, when you're reviewing your financials, poor profit margins and they're not where they should be, do something about it. Don't ignore it, because all you're doing is you're just burning money at this point. So, and we want to keep that money. You want to protect it. You want to protect that profit. So if those profit margins aren't where they need to be, your number one priority above everything else is to fix it, right? So whether that's reaching out to us or starting to dig in or whatever that is, I want you to take some sort of action. Another thing, and this is very common in pricing, is assuming that your customers are price sensitive, or they only care about price. They're only with you because of your prices. So that's an assumption that you don't want to make. When you increase your prices, the people that are your best customers are going to stay with you, and then you can get more of them.
Yes. One year, I was trying to get rid of some plowing customers. We raised prices by 25%. Not one of them left. Not one loss. And one of the things I will share, people who are really not good salespeople, and when I say not good salespeople, they don't get back to people quickly and they don't give estimates quickly. They lose sales and they think it's because it's their pricing. It's not. They're causing too much stress for people by not getting the pricing back to people. And I'll share with you, if you get prices to people quickly, you get more work, even if you're more expensive. And you've heard me talk about the chirper. My wife will say, hey, get a price for getting the house painted. And, I call up the guy and it takes him 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks or more to get me a price. And I hire the painter that comes and gives me a price, and I'll pay more because I can't take 5 weeks to get a price. My wife's asking me every 3 days, did you get a price? Did you get a price? So the guy shows up, he gives me the price after 5 weeks, and he thinks he didn't get the job because he's expensive, but it was really because I got a price from somebody else. He was the cheapest price, but he didn't get the job because he took 5 weeks and he thinks he's expensive. And that's why he didn't get the job. So then he lowers his price. It was really because he couldn't get a price. So don't be that person that keeps lowering your price because you think you're expensive because your sales process is horrible.
Right. Yeah. And that leads to another one, which is focusing on quantity over quality. Right. So don't sacrifice that quality just to do more work. Right. Because when we provide value to a customer, they stick around, and it's a lot more expensive to go find a new customer than it is to continue to sell and keep your current customers.
Yes. And focus on your current customers and past customers. They're 700%, they're 7 times more likely to buy from you, your past customers and your current customers, which is 700%. So that's probably the biggest thing I see people not focus on. They spend all their marketing money trying to attract new customers, and they spend almost no money on selling to their existing and current clients. Very little money. Yeah. When I see marketing budgets, and I almost see $0 to existing and current clients and past clients. It's all for the new. And that's the other thing. Like, if you're going to spend a lot of money on internet marketing, be very, very careful. We all operate in small markets, maybe 10 miles to 30 miles out. And that World Wide Web is really for big, big marketing. And you'll most likely, I'll guarantee you, web marketing is expensive and disappointing. I firsthand will be a testament for that.
Yeah. So being aware of the market that you are marketing to and making sure that you're including, these costs, and that would be, the overhead cost, right, for marketing, making sure that you're including those in your pricing strategy. But we don't want to drive it emotionally, right? That's the other thing. As I've seen clients, they drive their marketing spend emotionally, and they're like, oh, we need more and more and more revenue, right? It's being intentional and calculated and having a budget. So you care for that marketing a lot more than you do when you're just throwing money at it, right? So, and again, like Steve said, market to the people you already have. It's gonna be an easier sell. So those are some other things that will contribute to your overall pricing strategy of what to think of when you're looking at what are we pricing. And if it comes where it's like way, way too much, the other side of the coin is, well, what are you spending as well that's trying to support that pricing model, right? So it's like we don't want to spend 20% on marketing. You want to spend, that right amount, which I think is like 4 to 6%, depending on, your budget and where you're at.
Yes, you want to definitely look at where you are in business, like how many years you've been in business, what type of work you do, what you can afford too, right? We want to look at what we can afford. We don't want to spend that 4 to 6% until our pricing is right, because we want to make sure our pricing can afford it, really. And then we can spend it. We want to make sure that our pricing is right. And that's the other thing. We want to make sure our pricing is right and we can afford it first, not ahead. Like, oh, I'll get my pricing right once I have a whole bunch of customers. That's a really dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good.
Yep, we're good. I think we covered quite a few strategies that's going to help them really protect, your profitability, which is what we want. We want you to protect your profit. We want you to improve your efficiencies in your business. And we just want business to be easier for you and less stressful. So these were some good points that I think we touched on today.
Yes. And I think it's not just the lawn care landscape industry. I think, all even accountants, doctors, everybody, they have all this pricing challenges and struggles. And, it doesn't have to be that way. You just want to be as intentional as you can. If we can help, we're here. That's kind of what we do all the time. We're talking about it all the time. It's worth the investment. And then you can reap the rewards for years and years. And enjoy the rest of your business time and not be struggling and wonder why. Well, thanks, Christine. It was nice spending this time with you, and we look forward to you joining us on the next podcast, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.